Welcome to Season 5 of Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm your host, Randy Roberts, Executive and Career Life Coach. This season, we're exploring one of the most misunderstood capabilities in leadership, courage. Not the dramatic kind, but the everyday courage to step into discomfort, speak up when it matters, make hard calls, and lead forward even when the path isn't clear. You'll hear from executives and coaches sharing real moments that tested them and shaped their careers. My hope is that each conversation invites you to reflect on your own relationship with courage, where it's serving you, and where a braver step may be just ahead. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm really excited about this conversation today because I'm joined by an old friend, Scott Oehrlein, who started, like I did, started in pharma sales, and pretty quickly took on some marketing roles, was in sales leadership, marketing leadership roles, both in the US, global, Canada, made moves between big pharma companies to take on bigger roles. He was VP and head of sales at another big pharma company, VP of commercial excellence, and since then, he's taken on C-suite roles, mostly focused on commercial strategy, working with startups, working with companies that are looking to enter the U.S., and he's functioning at that level now. Scott, if I'm correct, you're doing both consulting, but you also hold a board position.
I
Um,
do. I do. I do hold a board position in a startup oncology company.
Great.
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
doing a little bit of a lot of little things around the industry right now.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you're an example of one of the things that I love right now, which is we all sort of create our own journey. There isn't any one path that people follow. And you've put it together in such an interesting way. And some of the other things that I know about you are all of the extracurricular things that you do in terms of athletics and outdoor activities and things, the things that are really important to you and the things that make you who you are and you've always brought to your leadership. So I'm hoping that all of that will come into our discussion today. So welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Randy. It's good to see you.
Good to
Well, as
see you.
always. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We we'll try and keep it we'll
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 keep this
keep
one
our
above
com
board.
we'll stay dressed for company today. All right, so let's start here. When we're thinking about the topic of leadership courage, when you think about that, Scott, how do you define leadership courage?
It's funny. No, we talked about doing this podcast a few weeks ago, and I kind of scratched my head because I never really thought about it as courage, right? But then you look back on a career and I don't know if courage is a thing. I think it's really a mindset. I don't know if it's pursuit of excellence or what have you, but courage for me is whether it's in your personal life, it's your professional life. It's more kind of a mindset, like how can you go just a little bit further, right? Um, I was lucky enough to have a consultant in my career. You mentioned I moved internationally, and I moved to Canada at one point in my career, and I had a great consultant that really did the first big deep dive into who you are, and it's kind of helped me understand my relationship with athletics, with work, and everything else. And he goes, "You're unreasonable." And I said, "Wow, that's an interesting word. I don't think most people would see me as unreasonable. I try to be kind of a culture engager of teams." And he goes, "No, not in that context." He goes, there are people that are more comfortable living every day with what's possible, right? And uh, and then there's people that try the impossible, and that can be a life of you know lack of fulfillment. But I'm one of those guys that just likes to push things a little further, right? You know,
Yeah.
I love fly fishing. It's not enough for me just to go fly fishing. I have to learn how to tie my own flies. I have to learn how to teach people to tie flies. I have to teach people how to go fly fishing. I have to fly fish for the most difficult fish to catch in the world on a fly rod. And I have to be a sports writer about it. Like it's just this life of, okay, what's next? How do you constantly, up your game, day to day, year over year? And I think it's who I am. I don't know why I'm that way. My mom always said, man, I was that kid that was always trying the next big thing, jumping bikes over ramps. I was the first one on the ground because I took it too far. But I don't know. I think it's kind of how I'm wired. Yeah.
Yeah, such a great place for us to start. One of the things that I'm thinking about is, they talk about uh, sustained performance and one of the important things is not being afraid to fall down, but how do you pick yourself up? Do you think there's something different about you than other people along the lines of what you just described?
I, I don't know, part of, I don't know if it's courage or, embracing innovation, trying new things. Within that conversation, either with yourself, with your family, with your business, um, the conversations when you're trying new approaches and pushing new things is always a discussion about risk. Like, it's you're not throwing caution to the wind in any of these things. They should be a natural progression from where you're from. There should be a plan around risks you're going to take. And it's not just about the business, how you're going to bring people along that journey, how you're going to bring your customers on that journey. Be clear with senior leadership and your management about what the risks are. Nothing's without risk, right? And what's your risk mitigation plan? And I don't remember ever taking, kind of risk or, trying something new that ever crashed the company, right? Um, because you always had that plan, but you have to have that plan. You can't push the boundaries unless you have a lot of pieces in place, and only a little bit is the business plan. It's the people, it's the culture, it's your customers.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's how I've experienced it in my career, in my personal life.
There's so much in what you're saying, and I think risk is such a natural part of this conversation because, to me, what are the things that take courage? To a great extent, are the things that we don't know how they're going to turn out.
Right.
And so there's risk involved, but you're talking about it. You may not describe it this way, but it sounds almost like a systematic approach to risk
Yep.
in terms of what is the true risk? What could happen here? How could we mitigate for it? What are our alternatives? That kind of thing. And it's good business planning. It's part of a forecasting methodology, almost that kind of mindset.
Yeah, and it's also the risk about status quo, right? The status quo has risk, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that watch your podcast are from the pharma industry. Holy cow, things are changing so fast that the status quo many times is riskier than change or doing something new, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a time of just rapid global changes in strategy, pricing, market access. Launch is much more challenging than it used to be. So, embracing of AI and technology, it's so many things are moving that the status quo is actually riskier than not moving forward and really pushing new approaches and new ways to go to market, new ways to satisfy customers, and ultimately new ways of satisfying patients, right? You can never take your eye off that.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It's very profound. I mean, the risk around status quo, and sometimes we don't think about that. But that I have that conversation with clients a lot, actually, about what's the risk of not doing the thing.
yeah,
And sometimes breaking it down that way can actually help you get into motion,
yeah.
because there is risk to whichever way you're going to go. It's just a matter of the mindset with which you take it on.
It is. It is. I mean, it's one of the things I like about being on this side of the table in my career now in consulting. I'm in the global pricing realm right now and using technology to help companies, figure out, the rapid changes that are happening in global pricing and global market access. And it's fun to see progressive cultures that lean in, right? They got it. The status quo is not going to work. Those things are changing very rapidly. And I see customers leaning in, and I see some, some pharma companies that they're still on the fence, right? Wait and see, and it's fun. I really enjoy working with those groups because you can help them and be a partner with them and helping them think about the risk of status quo, right? What is the real risk of moving forward, and how you can, close that gap pretty quickly, which is so important right now. So it's fun. Yeah.
It's an interesting space that you're in because the traditional big pharma world that we came out of is slow moving. I
Mhm.
mean, by intention
Yeah.
and, based on regulation and the barriers to entry and all those things that protect the industry. But there's these pieces that have to go into hyperspeed. It's a really interesting intersection.
It really is. It really is. It's exciting. It should be exciting, if you're a curious leader. And, it's really a time for people, leaders to leave a legacy too, right? Who's really going to stand up and embrace it and, change companies, change cultures, and change the way you engage patients. I think it's an exciting time all the time. So to me, it's not scary. If you really are, a thoughtful business leader in this time, it's really a time to step up and really try new things. And pharma is going to look very, very different 5 to 10 years from now. And I'm kind of jealous of the people who are still in organizations because they have that opportunity in front of them right now.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but you and I are in a similar situation. Used to be part of several different organizations and now working across organizations in different ways. And I find it fascinating to get a glimpse into how different companies are handling it, rather than be so immersed in just one situation.
It
Pretty
is.
interesting. Yeah.
It is. I learn a lot through all that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me ask you to reflect on your own career. If you can think of an example about a point in your career when courage was required of you, even if you didn't feel ready for it, even if you didn't feel ready for the next step.
Trying to figure out which one we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious too.
Yeah, no, I think the one that really reshaped the way I thought and my experience in not being afraid of change and risk in my career was actually just before you and I met. As you said, I was a field. I was in the field for 10 years. I was a sales rep, I was an MSL, and I was a district manager. And I was curious. I really, wanted to take the next step in my career. And, logical progression in careers at that time, would you go to headquarters and, you'd work in training and human resources, sales operations, and then your ultimate test would be a product management position. I had a chance to go right to product management. And it was at a time where our company was going through a lot of evolution and change. We were going through a lot of mergers, and we
Hmm.
just had a new leadership team. And my company was not the favorite of that new leadership team. We weren't seen as progressive. And I was put directly onto a brand that the team had left. I was the only product manager as a team of one. I had no director. And I had a great VP who was also new to marketing. And she and I were alone, and we were under pressure. And I remember all my inner circle saying to me, "What are you doing? You are crazy. You're going in 6 months, you're not going to have a job." And I just, that never frightened me. I saw as like I was given a golden opportunity to learn from really great people in the industry. I learned that I wasn't afraid of white space, and I learned to go back to school. Um, and those big moves, you got to be a student, but also you're under pressure to turn things around. And I hated it. I hated those first 6 months. I had to write my first business plan. I'd never done that. I really didn't have a boss. We were under a lot of pressure in the boardroom. And I should also say, I took over a brand that had launched in 3 months and started to flatten. It was a failed launch, and it was in a specialty therapeutic area. But I was the one there that started to understand strategy, kind of wrote my first business plan, relaunched the brand. I built a really good relationship with the new scene leadership that was there. It was a great opportunity. As a junior product manager at that point in my career, I got to build out the team, and the drug was a fantastic success. I mean, we repositioned that. I didn't know what repositioning a brand was,
Right.
what relaunching a brand was. I'd never done market research. I never engaged an advisory board. I never trained speakers, but I leaned on what I knew from the field. I learned very quickly what I didn't know to fill in the middle. And it was just it just it and I didn't I look back at it because I didn't have fear of things. I was fearless. I wasn't afraid to try new things. And a lot of it worked, some didn't, but overall it was really, really, it was a fantastic. I mean, that was a driver in my career. My goal to get to marketing was to be a regional sales director. And then I became fascinated with really how a pharmaceutical company works, strategy, finance. And I just love it. I stayed in marketing another 10 years. You know, I got a chance as a result, it opened up a lot of doors. I got to do it in Europe. I got to do it in Canada. I got to do it bigger brands and portfolios of brands. So it was really that was an important moment in my career. But I didn't know it at the time. But I look back at it, and it really was important.
Right. It's the way you describe that really rings true for me. And I have this conversation with clients a lot, which is sometimes those pivotal moments, you don't recognize them at the time necessarily. And sometimes the hardest things, like that first 6 months that you described, that you said how much you hated with a big smile on your face, because now you're looking back on it and you recognize how well it served you.
Yeah, and I look back at it too, and I've had other career inflections. Some were natural progressions of what you're already doing, but some were very difficult business situations. And my ears perk up now when people say to me, "Oh man, you are crazy for taking that role. There's no way you'll be successful." Man, I smile when I hear those things now because those are the real opportunities for leadership, real opportunities for change, real opportunities, if you call it courage or innovation, I mean, those are such great opportunities to lean into. And
Yeah.
if really the business situation is that difficult, there's nowhere to go but up. So don't shy away from those. And for people building their career, I mean, those are career accelerators. Don't look at opportunities. I don't. I just I coach people a lot. Don't look at those opportunities as potential, dings on your career. Look at them as opportunities. It's you can talk about times you went through difficult business decisions. You made courageous decisions, and here were the results. So no, that was my learning from that and many other similar transitions.
Yeah. It's it's remarkable how it doesn't surprise me with you because you are somebody who's so curious and you need, to keep learning and moving forward. And so the embracing the discomfort as a step towards growth is just like part of your DNA, what I know of you.
Mhm.
But it's something that I think really can serve others as uh, quite a lot. If you're staying safe, the growth opportunities often are limited. It's when you get uncomfortable and you move out into the unknown a little bit that you can really grow. So thinking about that, and I know that's a prime example that you described. I know there are others. What's the internal process? Like if you take on something now, you're in a field that's new to you now, right? Bringing a lot of skills to something that's new. What's the process that you take on internally, your mindset to approach it in the best way?
Yeah. So I know I'm in a new situation, and it's a term you told me many years ago, and you're gonna laugh. You're in a new situation when you experience that spilkus in the Genectigozoid. Did I get that right?
Close.
Yeah, those butterflies, right?
Spilkus in the Genectigazoid.
I use that term a lot. But I was lucky in another transition. I went from working into the US and I was working in Canada for the first time. And I went through a process called The First 90 Days. It's a book by Michael Watkins.
Mhm.
And that was a foundational thing for me. For anybody that's going, being promoted or going to a new business situation, it's a way to think about your first 90 days. Um, it helps you think about, the attributes or strengths you have that are going to help you, the new ones you have to learn. It helps you diagnose your business situation. Are you walking into a startup, a turnaround, sustained success, a realignment? And it talks about how you have to think about yourself personally and how you have to diagnose your business situation, how you have to diagnose yourself and define the type of leadership you need to demonstrate moving forward. I've read that book a dozen times. Every time I go through any type of transition, it reminds me to sit back, pause, learn, right? It's tough to you shouldn't jump. Sometimes you're pushed. Sometimes you have to go into a business situation and you have to make decisions very quickly. Um, it doesn't mean you can't take your first 90 days to learn, listen, diagnose, develop relationships, start understanding the culture and the business challenge. So I try to put myself through that process every time. It doesn't always work. Some things have to happen very quickly. Um, but the book was also foundational because no matter, what the business situation you're in, and it's also a way to negotiate your first 90 days with your boss. It's a chance to negotiate your success. And the big point of no matter what business situation you're in, the model says take two big bets. You have to declare two big bets at the end of your first 90 days, declare them to the organization, um, and you will negotiate that with your boss, which allows that discussion of risk mitigation, the bets you're going to take. Um, So that was foundational. So I think about that, I'm working in technology.
Hmm.
My friends think that's funny. You and I had a hard time getting my microphone to work to start this call, right? They think it's hysterical. So I'm going back to school a bit,
Yeah.
and I'm working, from the outside, consulting back to the industry. So yeah, you have to go through that process. You have to give yourself permission to go through that. And if you don't, it's very difficult to get early traction. It's very difficult really to get the connections you need with the organization, your customers, to be able to make those two big bets. And those are courageous bets, right? So, so that's what I think of when I go through transitions like that.
That it it makes so much sense, and I appreciate you mentioning that book because I think that can be helpful guidance for a lot of people. And analyzing what the situation is, taking a good hard look at who you are and what you bring,
Yeah.
figuring out what the gaps are and what you have working for you, and then placing those bets. I think that thinking is really, really helpful. Um, I think too, what you talk about is curiosity,
Mhm.
and there's an element of I think curiosity is a really important leadership skill. There's an element of that that almost takes courage because you have to have the courage to acknowledge there's things you don't know
Yeah.
and ask the questions. And but that's a really powerful example, but also process for those around you because it's amazing what comes out.
It's amazing what comes out. And, I mean, curiosity brings ideas. It doesn't mean those ideas have to get implemented, but it opens up just really good discussions. And we're talking about, making too big. They don't, not all things are big, right? And it's funny. Another learning moment of mine was back when you and I worked together earlier in our careers. My previous company had a really good relationship with senior military leaders at the time, like Schwarzkopf would Norm Schwarzkopf would come to campus, and he would be getting senior leaders together, just in one-on-ones. And I got a chance to go to one of those roundtables with Norman Schwarzkopf. I was scared to death, and you had to come up with questions. And one of my questions for him, I said, as I'm a new leader, and as I'm exploring curiosity, I'm at the first point. I have to make big decisions and live with those decisions. And I said, how do you do that as a senior military leader in the first Gulf War, right? You have to make big decisions that impact the world, impact people, impact family. I mean, just in
I
the
mean,
biggest.
literally lives depending on these decisions.
Definitely. And he big smile went on his face, and he laughed, and he goes, listen, I have no problem making decisions. I know they're big decisions. He goes, but I have a confidence in my team that they will challenge me if those decisions are wrong, and I'll be open to either, modifying that decision or changing that decision. And he goes, and if in the field of battle, that what our decision we made didn't work, I trust that people do the right thing in the field. And I always thought military was command and control. Like you don't break ranks. You don't do that. And holy smokes, I just it once it, you kind of get that freedom, to I don't know, it had me reframe my mind where making those decisions became much easier. Um, and with the expectation from my team, push back, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, we can redirect. It's okay. And so that made it, really a lot easier, in the way I thought through, big decisions I had to make through my career.
That example is so interesting. For someone like me who's never been in the military, I sort of had that same perception that you did. And
Yeah.
not uh, well, that's a whole nother podcast, how that mindset could benefit us today, but we'll put that aside for
That
now.
aside, yeah, yeah.
Let me ask you if you can think of an example of a time where a lack of courage or a lack of taking courageous action actually held business back.
Yeah. I, for me, I mean, courage is a lot easier when you have great cultures that embrace, you know, change and, innovation, and leaders that embrace it. Yeah. When you're in business situations, when cultures that don't embrace it and a leader that doesn't embrace it, that's tough. That's tough. So, and I listen, everybody's going to have those points in their career. And, there are a couple points in my career when I was in those situations, and I felt like I had to choose what I would stand up for
Mm,
because, you weren't going to win every battle, right? So in those situations, I felt I had to get very specific on the two or three things that were really important to me. And I don't know if I could have done it differently back then, but I know in deep in my heart that there were th things that kind of I let go, and they had huge impacts on the business. They had impacts on people. Um, so it's those are the challenging times, and it can change very quickly. I've been in an organization and embrace change, embrace courageousness. We had a motto about courageousness and high performing teams. We had very specific commitments around that, and the leader changed, and the credo got really ripped down. I think, holy cow. We really had to think very, very specifically about what we want to hold on to. Um, but in those situations, there were impacts on the business and people. So they're not easy. And but on the other side, I'm making more sense. The things we did do had positive impacts on the business
Mhm.
and positive impacts on people. So those are the challenging times, and those are very personal. And those are great times to have coaches. They're great times to have really good confidants. It's a really good time to lean on people, to, really, one, you need somebody to talk to in those situations. And number two, they can really advise you on how to navigate those situations very specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just when you're thinking through those tough things, it's amazing how valuable it is to just verbalize it. We get caught in our own heads
Yeah.
and we can't think of another way necessarily, so we kind of get into this I'm right thinking, and
Yeah.
just talking it out with someone makes such a difference. You know, it's another example of why a network is so important because that sometimes, no matter how courageous we are, like you got to run it past somebody. You got to pressure test your thinking. Otherwise, maybe you're not courageous, maybe you're reckless. Like you have to be somewhat rooted in reality.
Yeah,
And that's
recklessness is a whole different thing. Yeah. Yeah, but you learn from those experiences. Thing is, as you go through your career, yeah, some so awesome. And I'm lucky. I've had a lot. I've mostly had awesome experiences. I've had the tough ones too, but you learn from those. If you do nothing else, learn how you could have done things differently. Learn how you're going to be a leader in certain situations, and in that way, they're a gift. So, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so now, you have all this experience and, obviously this topic has woven its way through everything that you've done. Now you're in a situation when you're doing consulting, you're in these C-suite roles, you're mentoring a lot of other people.
Mhm.
What do you advise them about taking courageous action, doing the thing that scares them?
That's a good question. I mean, it's different for everybody, right? Um, you know, a lot of, I'd say more of the mentoring discussions, um, for me are rooted in what do you do now, right? Tell me about your role. Who are you, right? Where do you want to be in your career? Like, what's the 5-year plan? What's the 10-year plan? And and a lot of people don't know that, right? They know they want to move up. They don't know exactly where they want to be in 5 years and exactly where they want to be in 10 years. And for me, it's a trick question because the answer is the same. Take bold, courageous steps in your career, right? You don't want your career to be full of status quo type of stuff, right? Whether you want to be a brand director one day or a head of marketing or regional sales director or vice president of sales or a COO, you have the courage to put yourself in a variety of situations that are ultimately writing your resume. Think about it again. You're going to school, um, and these are your grades. And a lot of people want to grow into another role that's within what they do, and they want to go up the ladder to get to that role. And I have a story. I worked for a VP once. Um, he was I'm going to say very non-specific. He was a VP, big role, and he was a young guy, great role, made a lot of money, and he went linear in his career,
Mhm.
and he was in his early 40s and wanted to change to another part of the organization, and he couldn't do it because he hadn't gone laterally enough. So I
Yeah.
coach the courage I really talk to people about are having the courage to take on new type of roles, get out of your comfort zone. If you want to move up through market research, go to marketing for a while. be on your internal customer side for a while, and then come back to market research. So go to the field. I have so many conversations with people that are headquarter based and want to move up into higher roles, including head of sales. I'm like, well, you should work in the field for a little bit. So, and have the courage to do this in your career, go up, sideways, down, up. I mean, I know so many people that have done that, and it's less about your role and your title. It's getting those experiences. So the last 10 years of your career, you can do what you want. You have so much experience and background, but you have to have career courage to do that. You might have to have the courage to relocate. That's a personal discussion with your family. That's courageous. That's courage on your family's behalf. But
Yeah.
but that's the type of courage I'm talking about a lot of the time.
Yeah. Everything you're saying is leading me into what would be another podcast. So I need to rein myself in. But I mean, your advice to others is so wise, and it really embodies your spirit of, try it, lean into it. What you said from the beginning was, you're all about pushing things a little bit farther, doing a little bit more, doing it a little bit deeper, my word.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes across, and I appreciate it. To sort of what I want to do is just bring it back to a thought that you shared in the beginning as I wrap it up, which is the topic of leadership courage. And you didn't really think of it as courage. You thought of it as a mindset. It's how you approach things. And that's the spirit, the whole reason that I wanted to do this season around leadership courage. There's so much to think about. There's so much to say. And I think it's so important in ways that we often don't, we just don't pause and think about it the way would benefit us to do it. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time and for sharing everything that you shared. And now what we'll do is we'll go off camera and we'll do the outtakes.
Yes, very good. Yeah, we'll go off camera and have another conversation.
Exactly. Thank you, Scott. Best of luck with the current role you're taking on. I want to hear more about that.
Absolutely, Randy.
Talk to you soon.
Good being here today.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.